Have you ever noticed how spiritually exhausted you feel after months or even years of desperately asking God for the same things over and over again? That crushing weight in your chest when you wake up and realize you're about to spend another morning pleading for financial breakthrough, begging for healing, or crying out for divine guidance that never seems to arrive? What if I told you that this very approach, the one that countless spiritual teachers have instructed us to follow since we were children, is actually creating an invisible wall between you and everything you're seeking? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has this ever happened to you? You pray with intense passion for abundance to flow into your life, yet somehow you find yourself sinking deeper into scarcity with each passing month. You beg God for physical healing, pouring your heart out in desperate petitions, only to watch your symptoms intensify or remain stubbornly unchanged. You plead for clarity and divine direction, but instead of receiving answers, you feel more confused and lost than when you started. There's something profoundly wrong with this picture, isn't there? It's as if the harder we pray, the further away our blessings seem to move. Here's the uncomfortable truth that most spiritual communities refuse to acknowledge. Every single time you ask God for something, you're unconsciously programming your mind and spirit with a devastating message. When you pray for healing, what you're really declaring to the universe is, "I am sick." When you beg for financial provision, what you're actually affirming is, "I am in lack." When you plead for peace, you're reinforcing the belief that, "I am in turmoil." This isn't just semantics or spiritual philosophy. This is the hidden mechanism that's been sabotaging your prayers and keeping you trapped in a cycle of spiritual frustration. Think about the energy behind your prayers for a moment. There's an undertone of desperation, isn't there? A feeling of separation from what you desire, an acknowledgement that you don't have what you need, and that God must be convinced to give it to you. This consciousness of lack creates an energetic signature that actually repels the very abundance you're seeking. It's like trying to fill a cup while simultaneously drilling holes in the bottom. No matter how much effort you invest, you remain empty. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely revolutionize the way you approach your relationship with the divine. Smith Wigglesworth, after decades of profound spiritual seeking and breakthrough experiences, uncovered a truth so simple, yet so powerful, that it has the potential to unlock a flow of grace in your life that you never thought possible. This isn't about praying harder or finding the perfect formula of words. This is about understanding something fundamental that changes everything. What if the problem isn't that God isn't listening? What if the problem is that we've been approaching divine connection from entirely the wrong direction? What if there's a way to experience abundance, healing, guidance, and peace that doesn't require begging at all? Smith Wigglesworth spent years walking the same exhausting path that so many of us find ourselves on today. He prayed, he fasted, he pleaded with heaven, sometimes with tears streaming down his face, begging God to move in his life and in the lives of those he desperately wanted to help. But after decades of this intense spiritual seeking, he stumbled upon something that shattered everything he thought he knew about prayer and divine connection. The revelation was so simple that it almost seemed too good to be true, yet so profound that it changed the entire trajectory of his ministry and personal transformation. Here's what Wigglesworth discovered. The divine isn't playing a game of withholding blessings until we beg hard enough or prove ourselves worthy enough. Infinite abundance, perfect health, deep peace, and divine wisdom aren't locked away in some heavenly vault waiting for the right combination of words to unlock them. They're already flowing toward us, through us, around us in every single moment. The problem was never God's reluctance to give. The problem was our inability to receive, because we were so focused on asking that we couldn't see what was already being offered. Think about this for a moment. What if everything you've been praying for is already available right now, and the only thing standing between you and those blessings is a shift in your awareness? This isn't some mystical concept that requires years of meditation or special spiritual gifts to understand. It's actually the most natural thing in the world. Yet we've been conditioned to approach it backwards our entire lives. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing to join our community of seekers who are learning to shift from separation consciousness to oneness awareness. There's so much more we'll explore together on this journey. The transformation that Wigglesworth taught isn't about changing God's mind or convincing heaven to finally pay attention to your needs. It's about changing your consciousness from asking to receiving. Picture the difference between approaching God with clenched fists, desperately grabbing at what you need, versus opening your hands in quiet receptivity, allowing what's already flowing to fill them naturally. One approach is rooted in fear, lack, and separation. The other is grounded in trust, abundance, and connection. This mindset revolution changes everything about your spiritual journey. Instead of treating prayer like a negotiation where you're trying to get God to do something, you begin to recognize that what you seek already exists in the spiritual realm. Your task isn't to create it, manifest it, or force it into existence through the power of your asking. Your only task is to align your awareness with the truth that it's already yours. It's like tuning a radio to the right frequency. The music is already broadcasting. You're simply adjusting your receiver to pick up what's already there. The hidden truth behind this approach is that you stop operating from a place of desperation and start operating from a place of expectation. Not expectation that God will finally give you what you want if you say the right words, but expectation based on the knowledge that divine supply is already moving in your direction. Behind the scenes of your visible circumstances, there's a spiritual reality where wholeness, provision, and peace already exist. The question isn't whether God will provide. The question is whether you'll open yourself to receive what's already being given. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding this shift intellectually is one thing, but knowing how to actually practice it in your daily life is where the real transformation happens. The impact of this revelation extends far beyond your prayer time. It changes how you approach every decision, every challenge, every moment of your day. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to receive," if this resonates with something you've been sensing in your own spiritual journey. Wigglesworth often used a powerful metaphor to help people understand this shift in consciousness, and once you grasp it, your entire spiritual practice transforms. Imagine the universe as a massive radio station that never stops broadcasting. Right now, at this very moment, there are countless radio waves passing through the room where you're sitting. Music, news, conversations, all kinds of signals are flowing through the air around you constantly, but you don't hear any of it until you turn on a receiver and tune it to the right frequency, correct? Here's the revelation that changes everything. Those radio waves didn't start existing the moment you switched on your radio. They were always there. You simply adjusted your equipment to pick up what was already being transmitted. Divine supply works exactly the same way. Abundance, healing, wisdom, guidance, and peace aren't sitting in heaven waiting for your prayers to activate them like some kind of spiritual vending machine where you insert the right words and hope something drops down. These blessings are already flowing, already being broadcast into your life continuously, whether you're aware of them or not. Your spiritual practice isn't about convincing God to start the transmission. It's about tuning your consciousness to receive what's already being sent. This distinction might seem subtle, but the impact on your daily experience is absolutely massive. Most of us have spent our entire lives treating prayer like we're trying to get the radio station to start playing music just for us. We beg, we plead, we try different formulas and techniques, wondering why nothing seems to work. Meanwhile, the broadcast has been playing all along. We just haven't tuned our receiver properly because we've been so focused on asking that we forgot how to receive. Behind the scenes of what you can see and measure in your physical circumstances, there's a constant stream of divine intelligence flowing toward you, offering solutions to problems before you even recognize them, opening doors you didn't know existed, providing resources through channels you never considered. The fundamental mindset shift happens when you truly grasp that you're not standing outside of God's supply trying to get access to it. You're not separated from divine abundance by some great distance that your prayers need to cross. You're actually immersed in it right now, swimming in an ocean of infinite provision, surrounded by blessings on every side. The universe functions as this perpetual broadcasting station, transmitting divine ideas, creative solutions, healing energy, and unconditional love continuously. These transmissions never stop, never diminish, never run out. They flow whether you acknowledge them or not. Just like those radio waves pass through your environment regardless of whether your receiver is turned on. This is where your journey takes a dramatic turn. Once you understand that separation from your good was never real, that it was always an illusion created by your asking consciousness, everything changes. Your decisions shift from desperate attempts to make things happen to calm recognition of what's already unfolding. The hidden truth behind every circumstance you face is that divine intelligence is already at work, already broadcasting the perfect solution, already providing what you need. Your transformation begins the moment you stop trying to activate God's generosity and start opening yourself to receive what's already being given. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding the mechanics of receiving is where theory becomes practical reality. Drop the word tuned in the comments if you're beginning to sense how this applies to your own life right now. Let me show you something that most people never recognize about the energy behind their prayers. When you approach God in asking mode, you're broadcasting a very specific frequency into the universe. It's a frequency of lack, limitation, and separation. There's this underlying desperation that whispers beneath every word you pray, saying essentially, I am incomplete without this thing I'm asking for. I am broken and need fixing. I am empty and need filling. What most people don't realize is that this vibrational signature actually pushes away the very things you're trying to attract. It's like trying to pull a magnet toward you. While holding another magnet in the wrong position, the repelling force is stronger than your effort. Receiving consciousness operates on a completely different frequency. It vibrates with fullness, gratitude, and a deep sense of union with the divine. It's not arrogant or presumptuous. It's actually the most humble thing you can do because you're simply acknowledging reality as it truly is. When you practice receiving, you're recognizing that what God has, you have access to. What God is, you're an expression of. This isn't some New Age philosophy trying to make you think you're God. It's the recognition of your true identity as a living extension of divine intelligence and abundance. Behind the scenes of your human experience, there's a spiritual truth about who you really are, and that truth changes everything about how you interact with the invisible realm. The transformation from asking energy to receiving energy doesn't require years of spiritual training or complicated rituals. The practice itself is remarkably simple, though mastering it takes dedication and patience. Here's how you begin this journey toward a completely different relationship with the divine. Set aside just 10 minutes each day. Find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted by the noise and demands of daily life. But here's where the revolutionary shift happens. Instead of bringing your usual shopping list of needs, desires, and problems to this time, you approach it completely differently. Sit in stillness and simply affirm within yourself quietly and gently, I am now open to receive all that God is giving me. Pay attention to how different this feels compared to your normal prayer patterns. You're not asking for financial breakthrough, relationship healing, or physical restoration. You're not trying to manifest specific outcomes or convince heaven to intervene in particular situations. You're simply acknowledging that divine substance is already flowing toward you in this very moment, and you're opening your awareness to notice it and receive it. It's like how the earth doesn't beg the rain to fall. It simply receives what comes naturally. Like how your lungs don't plead for air, they naturally draw in what's already surrounding you. This subtle mindset pivot creates space for something extraordinary to happen. When you stop blocking the flow with your desperate asking, when you release the tension of trying to force outcomes, revelations begin to emerge that were hidden beneath all that noise. Divine guidance that couldn't get through your frantic mental chatter suddenly becomes crystal clear. Opportunities that were invisible to your asking consciousness become obvious to your receiving awareness. The impact of this simple daily practice ripples through every decision you make, every interaction you have, every challenge you face throughout your day. Put opening to receive in the comments if you're willing to try this approach for the next 10 days and see what shifts in your life. A gentle tap on the like button helps others who are searching for this message discover it too, creating ripples of transformation that extend far beyond what we can see. Let me share with you what happened when a woman named Maria put this principle to the test in the most difficult season of her life. For 3 long years, Maria had been praying for financial breakthrough with an intensity that bordered on violence. She would literally shake her fists at heaven, demanding that God answer her prayers while her debt mounted higher each month. Her asking had become almost aggressive, fueled by desperation and fear as she watched her circumstances spiral further out of control. Every prayer felt like a battle she was losing, and the exhaustion of maintaining that level of spiritual warfare was crushing her from the inside out. When Maria first encountered Smith Wigglesworth's teaching on receptivity, her immediate response was resistance mixed with fear. If I stop asking, God will forget about me completely, she told herself. My prayers are the only thing keeping me afloat right now. If I let go of that, I'll sink entirely. But desperation has a way of making us willing to try things we would normally reject. So Maria decided to experiment with this radically different approach for 30 days. Each morning and evening she practiced simply receiving instead of asking, opening her consciousness to divine supply without making demands or presenting her list of financial needs. The journey wasn't instantaneous or magical. The first 2 weeks actually felt terrifying because nothing seemed to be happening in her external circumstances. But something profound was shifting behind the scenes of her awareness. That constant knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest for years began to loosen. A strange peace she couldn't explain started replacing the panic that had driven her desperate prayers. By the 3rd week, unexpected opportunities began appearing. A freelance project she hadn't pursued came looking for her. A debt she thought was permanent got forgiven through an administrative error. A refund check arrived from something she'd completely forgotten about. Within 6 months, Maria's entire financial picture had transformed. But the real revelation wasn't just about the money. Her relationship with God had fundamentally changed. She was no longer a beggar standing outside the gates hoping for scraps. She had become a beloved child receiving her inheritance naturally and joyfully. The impact of that internal transformation was far more valuable than any external provision, because it changed how she approached every financial decision, every opportunity, every challenge that arose in her life moving forward. David's story reveals how this same principle applies to physical healing in ways that medical science can't fully explain. For 5 exhausting years, David battled a chronic health condition that seemed immune to both medical treatment and spiritual intervention. He had exhausted himself attending every prayer meeting, getting anointed with oil repeatedly, declaring healing scriptures over his body day and night. Yet his condition remained stubbornly present, mocking his faithful efforts. His asking had evolved into something close to anger at God for not responding to such persistent, faithful petitions. Everything shifted when someone introduced David to Wigglesworth's writings on spiritual healing. The concept initially startled him because it contradicted everything he'd been taught. What if healing wasn't something God needed to send down from heaven like a package? What if perfect health was already present in his true spiritual nature, and his desperate asking was actually blocking his awareness of that reality? Instead of begging for healing, David began practicing receiving, quietly affirming each day, I am open to receive the perfect health that is my divine inheritance. Type healing is present in the comments if this perspective opens something new in your understanding of how divine restoration works. David's progress came gradually over many months, not overnight. Some days were harder than others, and the symptoms didn't vanish in some dramatic instant. But slowly, steadily, something was shifting. The fear that had gripped his consciousness for 5 years began releasing its hold. Within a year, medical tests confirmed what David already sensed internally, significant improvement that his doctors couldn't fully explain through the treatments alone. They called it spontaneous remission. David called it learning to receive what had always been his spiritual inheritance. The power of this shift from asking to receiving extends far beyond finances and physical health. Jennifer discovered this truth through the most painful journey of her life, a marriage that seemed beyond repair. For years, she had prayed intensely for God to change her husband, to make him understand her, to fix their broken communication and restore the intimacy they'd lost. Her prayers were entirely focused on asking God to transform someone else, to intervene and reshape her partner into the person she needed him to be. Every conversation felt like a battlefield. Every disagreement confirmed that her prayers weren't working, and the exhaustion of fighting both her husband and heaven simultaneously was destroying her from the inside out. When Jennifer encountered Wigglesworth's teaching on receptivity, her first reaction was pure resistance. If I stop asking God to fix my marriage, it will definitely fall apart, she thought. The idea of releasing her desperate petitions felt like surrendering to inevitable divorce. But her current approach clearly wasn't producing any positive results, so she decided to experiment with this radically different path. Instead of asking God to change her husband, she practiced receiving divine love and peace into her own consciousness. Each morning she would sit quietly and open herself to receive God's unconditional love, not asking for anything external to change, but allowing her internal being to be filled with divine presence. The transformation began so subtly that Jennifer almost missed it. She noticed herself responding differently to her husband, less reactive when he said things that would normally trigger her, more genuinely peaceful instead of pretending to be calm while seething. Internally, offering love that felt authentic rather than strategic. The hidden truth behind this shift was that her change in consciousness created ripples throughout their entire relationship dynamic. As she stopped operating from lack and neediness, demanding that he fill voids only God could fill, he began responding to her differently as well. Behind the scenes of what looked like simple behavioral changes, a profound energetic shift was occurring that affected both of them. Thomas experienced this same principle in the realm of business when his once thriving company collapsed, dragging him to the edge of bankruptcy. His initial response was classic asking consciousness at its most desperate, bargaining with God, making promises about serving forever if heaven would just rescue his business, pleading with an intensity fueled by panic and fear. His prayers were exhausting, filled with the frantic energy of someone trying to convince God to intervene before disaster became irreversible. Every day brought mounting anxiety as he begged for breakthrough while watching his business continue its downward spiral. The blueprint for transformation arrived unexpectedly when Thomas discovered Wigglesworth's revolutionary approach to receiving. Instead of begging for business success, he began practicing receptive consciousness through daily sessions of simply opening himself to divine supply and guidance. His affirmation was beautifully simple. I am open to the infinite supply of God. Within 18 months, Thomas had not only recovered from near bankruptcy, but had created a more successful enterprise aligned with his authentic purpose and values. Right, consciousness creates reality in the comments. If you're beginning to see how these internal shifts produce external transformations that seem impossible from an asking mindset. What makes Wigglesworth's approach so practical is that he didn't leave people with just theory. He provided simple techniques to weave this receiving consciousness into the fabric of everyday life. One of the most powerful practices he taught was something he called the practice of the presence. Throughout your day, as you move through ordinary activities that normally feel mundane or automatic, you pause briefly and acknowledge something profound. God is present here and now. Not God will be present if you pray hard enough. Not God might show up if you're worthy enough. But God is already present in this exact moment. Whether you're washing dishes, driving to work, standing in line at the grocery store, or dealing with a difficult conversation, these micro-practices might seem too simple to be effective, but that's precisely why they work so powerfully. You're training your consciousness to remain in receptive mode throughout your entire day rather than only during your designated prayer time. Each brief acknowledgement of divine presence is like tuning your receiver again, reminding yourself that the broadcast is always playing, the supply is always flowing, the guidance is always available. Behind the scenes of your visible activities, there's a constant opportunity to recognize what's already being given rather than focusing on what you think you lack. Another transformative technique Wigglesworth emphasized was gratitude recognition, but not the kind of gratitude most people practice. This isn't about being thankful for what you hope to receive, or even for the blessings you consciously recognize. It's gratitude for the millions of gifts already flowing to you every single second that you've been completely overlooking. Thank you for breath flowing into my lungs without my asking. Thank you for my heart beating faithfully without my requesting. Thank you for the intricate systems operating in my body right now, without my conscious direction. This journey of noticing what's already being received shifts you from future-focused asking to present-moment awareness of abundance. Now, here's where most people stumble on this path, and understanding this obstacle beforehand can help you navigate through it, rather than getting stuck. The biggest challenge you'll face when shifting from asking to receiving is the persistent, nagging feeling that you're doing absolutely nothing. Your entire life you've been conditioned to believe that asking is active, powerful, taking charge of your spiritual life. Receiving, in contrast, feels passive, lazy, like you're just giving up and hoping for the best. Your ego will scream at you constantly, insisting that you have to pursue, you have to make things happen, you have to convince God to move on your behalf through the force of your petitions. This internal resistance is actually where most people abandon the practice and return to desperate asking, because the discomfort becomes too intense. But here's the revelation that changes everything about how you interpret that discomfort. It's actually a sign of profound progress. What you're experiencing is the dissolution of ego patterns that have dominated your spiritual life for years or decades. The feeling of doing nothing is actually the feeling of finally stopping your interference with divine flow. You've been trying so hard, pushing so forcefully that you couldn't recognize what was already trying to reach you. The hidden truth behind receptivity is that you're not being passive at all. You're being profoundly active in the spiritual dimension, just in a completely different way than your ego recognizes or values. Think about it like learning to float in water. When you first try, your body tenses instinctively and you sink. Every muscle fights against the water, trying to control the situation through force. Only when you fully relax and trust does your body discover that the water naturally supports you without any effort. Type "learning to float" in the comments if this metaphor helps you understand why receiving might feel so uncomfortable. At first, even though it's actually the most natural thing in the world. There's an even more advanced practice that Wigglesworth taught to those who had already begun experiencing the shift from asking to receiving, and this practice represents what he considered the highest form of spiritual consciousness available to human beings. He called it impersonal meditation, and when you first hear about it, it might sound strange or even pointless. But stay with me because this is where the entire journey leads, and understanding it transforms everything that came before it into preparation for this ultimate realization. Most people who stop asking and start receiving are still operating with an agenda. They've stopped asking God for material things, which is progress, but they've started asking for spiritual experiences instead. They want enlightenment, mystical visions, spiritual powers, or at least the feeling that they're making spiritual progress. This is just asking consciousness in disguise, a more sophisticated version of the same transaction-based relationship with the divine. True receiving at its deepest level is completely impersonal, wanting absolutely nothing, including spiritual attainment itself. In impersonal meditation, you practice receiving without any goal whatsoever. You're not receiving to get healing. You're not receiving to manifest abundance. You're not even receiving to become more spiritual or enlightened. You're simply resting in receptive awareness, for its own sake, with no ulterior motive behind it. The first time you try this, your mind will probably panic. What's the point if I'm not getting anything from this? But that very question reveals the hidden truth about where your consciousness still stands. You're still treating spirituality as a transaction, still approaching God as a resource to tap, rather than a presence to dwell in. This mindset revolution represents the ultimate transformation of your spiritual journey. Behind the scenes of all your spiritual seeking, there's been this subtle assumption that you're incomplete and spirituality will complete you, that you're broken and God will fix you, that you're empty and divine connection will fill you. Impersonal meditation dissolves that entire framework. You begin experiencing God not as something that gives you things, but as the very ground of your being, the consciousness in which you live and move and exist. The impact of this shift is that spirituality stops being about achieving anything and becomes simply about being present to what already is. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because there's an ultimate truth that ties everything together, a revelation that brings all these practices and principles into complete clarity. Wigglesworth spent decades discovering and teaching this truth, and once you truly grasp it, your entire understanding of yourself, God, and reality itself fundamentally transforms in ways you can't anticipate from where you currently stand. Here's the revelation that changes absolutely everything. You are not separate from God trying to receive gifts from an external source somewhere out there in the universe. You are the very consciousness of God becoming aware of your own infinite nature. When you practice receiving, you're not actually getting something new that you didn't have before. You're removing the veil of separation consciousness that blocked your recognition of what has always been yours. What has always been you. The problem was never God's unwillingness to give. God has been pouring infinite abundance, perfect health, divine wisdom, and unconditional love toward you without ceasing from the moment you came into existence. The problem was your inability to receive it because your consciousness was programmed to focus on lack rather than abundance, on separation rather than oneness, on asking for what you supposedly didn't have instead of receiving what you've always possessed. Drop. Removing the veil. In the comments if this truth is beginning to penetrate beyond intellectual understanding into something you're actually sensing in your own awareness right now. Every moment you spend in this receiving consciousness, you're not becoming something you weren't before. You're simply recognizing what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioned thinking that taught you to beg for what was already yours. Your spiritual journey isn't about convincing God to notice you or getting heaven to finally respond to your prayers. It's about opening your eyes to the abundance that has been surrounding you all along, the divine presence that has never left you, the infinite supply that flows whether you acknowledge it or not. If this message landed somewhere deep in your spirit today, if something inside you resonated with this truth even before your mind fully understood it, I'd love to know you made it all the way through. Just drop, "I choose to receive," in the comments, so I can see who's truly ready to make this shift from asking to receiving in their own life. Your presence here matters, and knowing this connected with you helps me understand what's serving this community we're building together. I create these videos because I genuinely believe these spiritual insights have the power to transform lives from the inside out. If you found value in what we explored today, consider subscribing so you don't miss the deeper conversations we'll continue having about living from spiritual truth rather than material illusion. A quick tap on the like button helps other people who are searching for this message find their way here too. And honestly, that connection we've created over these minutes together means everything. There's another video right here that goes even deeper into how to maintain this receiving consciousness when your circumstances seem to contradict everything you're believing for. It's a powerful companion to what we just covered. Click and continue with me over there because the journey doesn't end here. It's really just beginning.